let's kind of go down the path here of the cocaine and why it matters. They shut down the White House because they were concerned this was anthrax, which is how we became aware that this story existed in the first place. They knew they had found a white powder. They were concerned that it might be anthrax. They shut it down. If the White House, which is using its media allies to say we may never know who brought this cocaine into the White House, if they are going to make that argument, then, Buck, it raises this question. That would then mean that if someone had brought anthrax into the White House, if this had been determined to be a legitimate terror attack, that the White House wouldn't be able to uncover who brought anthrax into the White House. I don't believe that's true. But if it is true, it would mean that the most secure building that a residence in the United States is actually so insecure that someone could bring in anthrax, undertake a legitimate terror attack inside of the White House, and we would be unable to know who did it. So this, to me, we got a lot of people who work in the White House press corps who listen to this show. I would love to hear Karine Jean-Pierre pressed, wait a minute, you thought this might be anthrax. Does that mean that someone could bring anthrax into the White House, institute a legit terror attack, and the Biden administration is telling us it would be impossible to figure out who that person was? That's a really good angle that deserves to be explored, because I think not only, one, would it be awful if it were true, but it also exposes the illegitimacy of the argument and the deceitfulness of it to argue to the American public, oh, we may never know who brought this cocaine in.
Do you think they will ever tell us who did it? I do not.
I think the pressure should be ratcheted up to the extent that this should be significant. And let me say this.
Wait, hold on. Do you think they're actually going to tell us, though? You think we're going to find out?
I think that it is, if it's Hunter, Buck, I think they could spin it. If it's Hunter, and I said as I finished off the first hour, the evidence to me actually starts to make, given it's a VIP entrance, given that we know, I saw someone say on social media, a funny analogy. They were like, this is like McDonald's saying when they had hamburgers stolen, we have no idea who might have stolen the hamburgers, and like the hamburglar, like sitting right out there on the side of the building, like, oh, I don't know who took the hamburgers either. If you have a drug addict in the White House who has consistently been using drug addicts, documenting it recklessly, I think the number one suspect of who might bring cocaine into the White House is clearly Hunter Biden. If it's Hunter, I think they might come out, Buck, and say, this is what addiction does. The president loves his son.
The president loves his son. That's what they always say, something along those lines. Whenever we find out more about the extent of Biden family corruption, which is what is so important here, they always pretend that this is about some personal animus toward Hunter. I don't really care how many strippers Hunter Biden hangs out with. That's his own.
I don't care how much drugs he does. The fact that he has a security clearance should trouble every American. Think about this, Buck. They are arguing right now to the American public. Donald Trump having documents, years-old documents, in his private residence under Secret Service protection in locked private areas of his club is such an American security threat that he should go to prison for the rest of his life, while they are simultaneously allowing Hunter Biden, whom we know has deep and extensive ties to the Chinese Communist Party that he has sold for millions of dollars in ill-begotten gains, who is also a drug addict who is engaged in reckless behavior both in his personal and private lives. He should be able to get on Air Force One and go to Camp David and hang out with his dad and hear every single significant American security issue going on. And he should be able to just come in and out, gallivant through the White House whenever he wants.
This is why the Chinese give him millions of dollars, Clay, right? This is why, because he's like the perfect vessel for influence peddling and perhaps even information transfer.
Correct.
Which is not something else that anyone's really talked about.
You were in the CIA. Can you think of a better potential asset if you were China than the drug-addled, reckless son of the president of the United States who is so dementia-riddled that he has no idea what's going on. I can't think of any more of a security threat than Hunter Biden being allowed to hang out for all of these top secret things that are going on a regular basis with his dad who has no idea what he's saying from one moment to the next. I mean, if you were in charge of recruiting assets, Buck, can you think of a better asset? Like if China had the Hunter Biden equivalent, would we not want to do everything we could to get our fingers into Hunter Biden's world if it was China?
This is why no one looks at China, the Chinese Communist Party carve out who was sending him money. I'm like, what are they doing? They're so silly. Why would they give
right.
Hunter? No, the problem is Hunter Biden taking the money because we all know what he's offering in response. It's not what Burisma. This is the crazy part that everyone needs to remember.
Yes.
That was money well spent. The Chinese Communist Party bribes to Hunter. Money well spent from their perspective.
Oh, yes.
He's a perfect person to be compromising in that way.
I would love, if I were trying to corrupt the Chinese government, to have the equivalent of Hunter Biden that we could be corrupting if Kim Jong-un had a son in North Korea who was as incompetent as Hunter Biden, and we could give him a few $1 million and know everything that was going on in the inner reaches of the North Korean government. That would be money well spent by our by our security apparatus. The Chinese know what they're doing. Ukraine knew what they were doing. The fact that we're still allowing this guy to have unfettered access to top American secrets through his dementia-addled dad, while trying to put Donald Trump in prison for the rest of his life because of paper storage disputes, is maybe the most compelling sign of a two-tier justice system that has ever existed in the history of American justice.
Yes. And yet, I have been perhaps a little salty and a little cynical all along, but I've said Hunter's not going to, I think it was surprising for people because it was so blatant, the cover-up sweetheart deal thing that Hunter got. But that's why when I look at this cocaine situation, this is too much of a liability for the powers that be to let this get taken to its fruition, taken to the end point here of who is responsible for this. So the system will cover it up. And this is the same reason, like, people that want to understand what was really going on with the Epstein thing. Like, how is it that guy was able to get it? Well, once you see that his whole game was compromising in the most, dead to rights, it's all over for you kind of way, incredibly powerful, wealthy people, then he was able to manipulate aspects of it. And we still don't have the full answers on that one. But once you see the weak points in the system and the manipulation that is possible, none of this stuff really becomes as surprising anymore. And I just think that's maybe the only way we find out who the cocaine belongs to. Was there a Cocaine Bear movie, as an aside? Didn't they make a Cocaine Bear movie recently? Obviously no bears in the White House, but I never saw that movie. I wonder if it was worth watching. The only way we find out is if it's someone who is so low level that they will feed that person to the wolves publicly, and that's the only way. But I even then I don't see it happening. I think they're going to say we could never know. We'll never know who the real cocaine baggy person was.
If that's true, and it could be, that's where the media needs to grill Karine Jean-Pierre and just say, okay, pretend this was anthrax instead. We shut down the White House. For people out there who say, oh, it's just cocaine, why should we care about that much? Well, they shut down the White House because they were concerned it was anthrax and a terror attack. They're telling us that they wouldn't be able to figure out who brought anthrax into the White House if they're telling us they can't find cocaine. Second part on this, Buck. You may be right about low-level staffer, and this is where the Democrats play the game well. They'll have some low-level staffer say, oh, my God, I brought cocaine. I've had an addiction issue with cocaine. I'm going to go to rehab. And then you know what will happen, Buck? That low-level staffer will come out and get a $250,000 a year job somewhere in the Democrat Party sinecures where they're taken care of going forward. Right? That's what would end up happening. Because there won't be any prosecution. There won't be any significant crime brought. Somebody will say, hey, for the good of the party, will you fall on the sword, 25-year-old, And the 25-year-old will say yes, say that he or she has an addiction issue. They will then go to, rehab, whatever it is, and then get a $250,000 job and be snorting coke off strippers, Hunter Biden style, within a few months.
You remember this? You're going to hold this in your back pocket, Jack. The old Potomac two-step. That's how they play the game, man. Sometimes you got to, with the Democrat machine, yeah, maybe you fall on your sword, but they'll patch you up and they'll give you some gig at MSNBC afterwards, or you'll get some sinecure, some post somewhere where you're overpaid, you're doing a BS job, and no one cares. That's how they do it. This is very effective, I would know. It's a very powerful tool they have.
But I would bet it's Hunter, because ultimately, Buck, I think this was I could see Hunter coming in on his phone. If I were constructing how this happens, Hunter, who has no respect for White House security because he believes he's above all law, is on the phone with somebody on his cell phone as he's coming in, and he recognizes that he's looking for something in his pocket, and he's probably under the influence of a substance, because I don't buy the fact that Hunter Biden is suddenly clean and doesn't use any drugs at all anymore. And he reaches into his pocket to look for something, pulls stuff out, puts it on a shelf, doesn't pay attention to what he's taken out of his pocket because he's on a phone call, not paying attention, no one's speaking to him, just keeps walking right through. And then, 45 minutes, an hour later, somebody suddenly says, oh my God, there's a baggie of white powder here.
If it's Hunter.
Yeah.
Does he get bagged, so to speak?
This is where, Buck, they are sitting around right now. Ordinarily, I think it's Hunter, he has an addiction, they would come out with that. I think it would probably kill his plea agreement, because technically under his plea agreement, he has to submit to 2 years of drug testing, and if he tests positive, he goes to jail. So if they come out with someone else, I actually think the most likely thing is it's a random 25-year-old who is low level and says, oh, it was me, I brought cocaine into the White House.
Man, this is because if it were Hunter taking the fall for it,
that throws the plea agreement out, I think, Buck.
If that were to happen, then people would start to think that this was actually, want to get really crazy here? It's a Friday, everybody. A Democrat deep state plot to finally push Biden aside by having Hunter finally be, oh my gosh.
I love, this is CIA, Buck. This is, what if it wasn't Hunter and they actually just planted cocaine in the White House because they knew that everybody would just presume it's Hunter? Who would be that would be the DNC going next level. I think it's probably just Hunter with the cocaine, because we know Hunter has cocaine all the time. But that would be unbelievable, because none of us would believe that it was anybody other than Hunter.
I think you're never going to find out who it is.
You should be CIA director. That's a hell of a plot.
I think you're never going to find out who it is, but we'll see.